The end of our stay was fast approaching, but before we left, we made up our minds to go once to the top of Arunachala. This time, nothing prevented us from carrying out our plan, and soon after dawn, we took leave of Maharshi, whose repeated injunction was not to hurry and to go slowly. After 3 hours of steady climbing, with an occasional rest beside the numerous springs gushing out of rocks where we were able to slake our thirst and pour cooling water on our heads, we at last neared the summit. As we approached, we were gradually enveloped by a thick fog, and the last steep ascent was performed in the midst of low-hanging clouds. We now took off our sandals, since no one was supposed to walk otherwise than barefoot on the spot where the sacred fire has burnt. A cold wind was blowing, and the damp atmosphere penetrated us through and through. We found ourselves on a flat, rocky ledge, a few steps bringing us to the edge of a precipice. The dense fog shut out the view and hedged us in on all sides. We did not talk, but stood apart from one another, while our companions, who were very religious, meditated or chanted mantras. Then came a most startling experience, one of utter loneliness, the impression of being entirely cut off from the world below, alone, as it were, on an uninhabited planet, and with all the deathless, timeless sensation of being, which is impossible to describe in words. Suddenly, as if by magic, the clouds lifted, and in a few minutes the whole country appeared in the glorious sun, like a rich Persian carpet, with the blue lakes, the many-colored rice fields passing from bright green to orange, and at our feet the great temple looking like a small, insignificant toy. As we proceeded further on our adventurous travels and watched the holy mountain of Arunachala gradually disappearing in the distance, the certainty of returning soon to Tiruvannamalai on our way back from the south took away all regret, and we joyfully resumed our wanderings. It was incredible to think we had only been a month in India and felt already so utterly at home, in spite of the difficulties of climate, language, and customs. In some inexplicable way, Europe seemed to recede into a remote past, like a dream which is forgotten on awakening. Other people noticed how familiar we appeared to be with Indian customs. They would not believe us when we mentioned the date of our arrival. A few days were spent at Adyar, after which we boarded a steamer from Madras to Pondicherry. At dawn, we found ourselves lying some little distance off the coast. There is no harbor, and the passengers are taken ashore by small rowing boats to a primitive-looking jetty. In stormy weather, it is extremely difficult to jump on to the steps leading to the platform, there being always the risk of missing one's footing and falling into the sea, where the presence of sharks is by no means reassuring. However, the landing proved comparatively easy, as there were hardly any waves. We noticed some curious boats made out of strips of bark sewn together and used by the natives to take the goods to or from the steamers. They run their craft into shallow water and unload them, carrying the heavy loads on their backs. Pondicherry proved a disappointment and should never be considered in any way as characteristic of South India. The people are quite degenerate, because no doubt of the free trade in alcohol, sold at a low price. In spite of the clean-looking white houses and quiet streets, reminding one of an old French provincial town, the atmosphere was most unpleasant. The only haven of refuge, like an island of peace and purity, was Sri Aurobindo's ashram, consisting of a few low buildings amongst shady gardens and sweetly scented flowers and shrubs. Here lives a great Indian saint, well known for his political work in bygone days, and now entirely given over to spiritual pursuits. His numerous books on yoga are of profound interest to the student, and he is undoubtedly a very remarkable personality. Unfortunately, he can only be seen 3 times a year, and only then after permission has been granted. Even the mother, the spiritual wife of Aurobindo, a French lady who is in close touch with him and who runs the ashram, is not easily approachable. As we had not taken the necessary steps to secure a possible interview, we contented ourselves with a rapid glimpse of the cool, spacious rooms and the library where the disciples were resting or studying, and walked through the garden to the hall where the daily evening meditations are held, but which are strictly private and limited to the accepted few attached to the ashram. This sort of exclusiveness is all the more noticeable after the freedom enjoyed at Tiruvannamalai, where at any time visitors are welcome to see and speak to the Maharshi. A car took us away from the town to the village of Villanur, 5 or 6 miles away and still in French territory. There is a small temple with the usual sacred tank, but the most beautiful and unexpected sight is a nearby lake, surrounded by palm trees and covered with pink lotuses. We climbed over a fence and sat on the edge of the water, admiring the strength and beauty of the flowers rising above the sturdy leaves. Suddenly, an Indian appeared carrying some freshly picked buds, still covered with drops of water. Their exquisite color and shape are amongst nature's most perfect creations, and filled me with delight. To hold a lotus in my hands had been one of the dreams of my childhood, and its realization, though outwardly a small, insignificant event, was infinitely precious and a source of deep joy. The happiness which ever accompanies the perception of the beautiful is but the vision of the absolute, lying in the heart of all things, and which every human being must one day discover for himself. Perhaps no flower can better give out this silent message than the lotus, and that is why we find it constantly referred to by mystics to illustrate various stages in the growth of the soul. Born in the mud, rising through water into the pure air, the lotus opens to the sun, a true symbol of the divine in man, rising through matter into the realm of spirit, where it blossoms forth in all its perfection.